A father's unbroken love when the truth shatters everything you know. Imagine waking up one day to find that your entire reality has shifted. That the children you've nurtured and loved as your own share no biological bond with you. How would you react? Could you still look at your family the same way? What would happen to all the memories, the little moments, and the shared laughter? Today, we unravel the story of a man who faced exactly this scenario, a discovery that tore apart his perception of love, loyalty, and family, yet ultimately revealed the depth of unconditional love. The protagonist of this story, whom we'll call Daniel, has lived what most would call an ordinary yet fulfilling life. He married his high school sweetheart, Emma, and together they built a life, raising 5 beautiful children who brought joy and meaning to every passing day. Daniel's life was filled with the typical ups and downs of marriage, long work hours, challenges of raising kids, and the small everyday moments that make life worth living. It was a life he wouldn't trade for anything. To him, Emma was not only his partner but also his confidant and greatest ally. Until everything changed. It all started with an ancestry test. One of those simple kits you buy online that promises to trace your roots and uncover your heritage. His eldest daughter, Lily, was curious about her family's background, a fun project that she thought would reveal something new and interesting about her origins. But when the results came back, they didn't show any of Daniel's family history. Not a single connection to his Irish roots, the characteristic red hair, or even a hint of the ancestry he knew so well. Confused, Lily confided in Daniel, unsure what to make of it. Daniel, being the loving and supportive father he always had been, reassured her that no matter what, she was his daughter, and he would always love her. But deep down, Daniel needed clarity, and so they decided to take a formal paternity test. The result was devastating. Daniel was not Lily's biological father. He felt the weight of the truth crush him. This wasn't just about genetics, it was about trust, loyalty, and the life he thought he knew. The ground beneath him seemed to crumble as he confronted the unimaginable. Emma had been unfaithful. He struggled to understand, to make sense of what this meant for his family and for the woman he had loved since they were teenagers. Daniel knew he needed to know the full extent of the situation. Not just for himself but also for the sake of his other children. He wanted to believe it was an isolated mistake, a one-time lapse that could be forgiven with time and effort. But when he asked his other children, except his youngest, who was still in school, if they would agree to take a paternity test, the truth only became more unbearable. One by one, the results came back. Not one of his children, except the youngest, was biologically his. To add salt to the wound, his 4 children had 3 different fathers. The reality of Emma's infidelities was far more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't just one mistake, it was multiple affairs spanning years. Possibly the entirety of their marriage. When Daniel confronted Emma, expecting an apology, a confession, or at least an explanation, she offered none of these. She dismissed the results, claiming they must be flawed. Her defensiveness, her refusal to even address what Daniel had discovered, only deepened his sense of betrayal. She seemed more concerned with maintaining appearances than acknowledging the hurt she had caused. Daniel found himself at a crossroads. How do you move forward when the very foundation of your life has been shaken? How do you continue to be the loving father you always were when the trust you had in your partner has been shattered beyond repair? But amidst the heartache and confusion, Daniel's children were his only source of solace. Their reaction to the situation was both heartbreaking and beautiful. They didn't care about the DNA results. They only cared about their father's pain. They assured him repeatedly that, to them, he was their dad, the only one who had ever been there for them, the man who had loved them unconditionally and raised them. Their unwavering love gave Daniel the strength he needed to keep going. He realized that biology had little to do with fatherhood. It was the years of sleepless nights, the scraped knees he had bandaged, the bedtime stories, the laughter, and the love that defined his role as their father. During this incredibly difficult time, Daniel also found himself reflecting on the very nature of loyalty and betrayal. He realized that loyalty is not simply about being physically faithful, it's about emotional honesty, transparency, and the mutual respect that forms the core of any relationship. Emma's betrayal wasn't just about the affairs, it was about the years of lies, the false reality she had built, and the fact that she never gave Daniel the chance to understand, forgive, or even come to terms with what had happened. The tragedy escalated when, after weeks of silence and distance, Daniel returned home one evening to find that Emma had taken her own life. She had overdosed, leaving no note, no explanation, and no opportunity for closure. In that moment, the devastation Daniel felt was beyond words. He had lost the love of his life, and the mother of his children, without ever understanding why. The guilt weighed heavily on him. Had he pushed her too far in his search for answers? Could he have handled the situation differently? The questions haunted him, and there were no answers to be found. The aftermath of Emma's death was even more challenging for Daniel. Not only did he have to come to terms with his own grief, but he also had to be strong for his children, who had lost their mother in the most unexpected and tragic way. They had to navigate their own grief while trying to help their father hold it together. Daniel's children became his anchors, the reason he found the strength to get up each day and keep moving forward. The love they had for one another, despite everything, was the one thing that remained unbroken. Daniel's journey did not end there. He realized that he needed help to process everything that had happened: the betrayal, the loss, the grief, and the overwhelming sense of guilt. He decided to seek therapy, both for himself and for his children. It wasn't an easy decision, but he knew that they needed a safe space to express their feelings, to heal from the trauma they had experienced. Therapy helped Daniel understand that Emma's actions, though deeply hurtful, were not a reflection of his worth or his ability to love. It also helped him begin to let go of the guilt that had consumed him since her death. He came to understand that Emma's struggles were her own, and while he wished he could have helped her, he couldn't take responsibility for her choices. As Daniel and his children began to rebuild their lives, they found strength in the small moments, the family dinners, the shared memories, and the rituals that had always brought them comfort. They learned to redefine their family, not by the bonds of blood but by the bonds of love and shared experiences. Daniel found himself becoming even closer to his children, as they navigated their grief together, supporting one another through the darkest moments. Daniel's story is a powerful reminder that love, trust, and loyalty are not always straightforward. They are complex, multifaceted, and sometimes deeply flawed. In relationships, betrayal can take many forms: physical, emotional, or even the betrayal of one's expectations and dreams. But at the core of every relationship is the ability to forgive, to let go, and to move forward, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. One lesson that stands out from Daniel's experience is the importance of emotional transparency. Relationships are built on trust, and when that trust is broken, it is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, to rebuild. Emma's refusal to acknowledge her actions or to give Daniel any explanation robbed them of the chance to find closure or to even attempt to repair the damage. It was the lack of honesty, more than the affairs themselves, that ultimately destroyed their relationship. Another crucial lesson is that biology does not define family. Daniel's children loved him not because he was their biological father, but because he was the one who had always been there for them. He was the one who had held them when they cried, celebrated their successes, and supported them through their challenges. Fatherhood, or parenthood in general, is about the love and care you give, not about genetics. Daniel's children's reaction to the paternity test results was a testament to the strength of the bond they shared. A bond that could not be broken by something as superficial as DNA. Daniel's story also serves as a reminder of the importance of mental health. Emma's decision to take her own life was a tragic outcome that left her family devastated and searching for answers. It underscores the need for open conversations about mental health, the importance of seeking help when struggling, and the critical role of support systems in times of crisis. Daniel's decision to seek therapy for himself and his children was a crucial step in their healing process, allowing them to begin to make sense of their pain and to start rebuilding their lives. Lastly, Daniel's journey highlights the power of resilience. In the face of unimaginable pain, betrayal, and loss, he found the strength to keep going, to be there for his children, and to rebuild a life that had been shattered. Resilience is not about being unbreakable, it is about finding a way to move forward. Even when everything seems lost, it is about allowing yourself to grieve, to feel the pain, but not letting it define you or your future. The story of Daniel and his family is one of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately, the unbroken bond of love. It shows us that even when faced with the most devastating truths, Love can endure. It may change. It may be tested, but it does not simply vanish. Daniel's love for his children remained steadfast. Even when everything else in his life seemed to fall apart, his children's love for him was equally unwavering, proving that family is not defined by blood, but by the love, care, and support that bind people together. If you take one thing away from Daniel's story, let it be this: love, in its truest form, is unconditional. It is not about perfection. It is not about never making mistakes. It is about being there, day in and day out, through the good times and the bad. It is about showing up for the people you love, even when it's hard, even when you're hurting, and even when the future seems uncertain. It is about forgiveness, resilience, and the understanding that no matter what happens, the love you share is what truly defines you. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who might find comfort in Daniel's journey, please share it. Remember, we all face challenges in life, but it is how we respond, how we support one another, and how we continue to love that truly defines who we are. And above all, never forget to tell your loved ones how much they mean to you, because in the end, love is what makes life worth living. The day I fought back how a strict supervisor learned a lesson in humanity. Imagine being forced to reveal your most vulnerable moments to the world, even when you explicitly asked for privacy. This is a story that begins in the quiet corridors of a university program and escalates into an unexpected confrontation between an overzealous supervisor and a determined student battling a life-threatening illness. If you've ever felt like the world demanded too much from you when you had nothing left to give, this story will resonate deeply. This story is about a student fighting cancer who was put in an impossible position by her supervisor, Miss M. As you read through, you'll find the power of resilience, the unexpected satisfaction of revenge served in the most poetic way, and important lessons about empathy, respect, and the boundaries that should not be crossed. Our protagonist, let's call her Jane, was diagnosed with a rare form of ovarian cancer at the beginning of the year. Despite undergoing surgery and chemotherapy, Jane managed to keep up with her commitments at university. She was part of an ambassador program where students with high academic standing worked a few hours each week, in exchange for having their tuition covered. For Jane, this program was not just about financial support, it was about having something normal to focus on. Something to keep her connected during the difficult journey of fighting cancer. Jane was private to the point that even some of her closest friends didn't know about her illness. Her supervisor, Miss M. A stickler for rules, made things increasingly difficult. Miss M. was not the type of supervisor to understand nuances or special situations. She followed the rules strictly, sometimes to the point of absurdity. For instance, she insisted that the ambassadors clock in on Microsoft Teams by typing, "I'm here," and "I'm leaving," turning what could be a simple timekeeping task into an endless sea of redundant messages. Jane tried to suggest an automated time clock feature, but Miss M shot it down, accusing Jane of undermining her authority. The real conflict came one Monday when a virtual meeting was scheduled with the dean of the college. The meeting was a big deal, as it was to be live-streamed on the university's website and YouTube channel. Miss M sent out an all-caps email demanding that everyone have their cameras on for the entirety of the session. The email was so dramatic in its phrasing that it almost came across as a joke. Students must have their cameras on and phones off. Repeat. Phones off. Cameras on. Jane chuckled at the melodrama but felt uneasy because she knew she had a conflicting doctor's appointment that day. Jane wrote back to Miss M explaining the situation and requesting permission to keep her camera off. She sent follow-up messages but received no response. She messaged Miss M directly on Teams, and still, nothing. Monday arrived. Jane was in the hospital, hooked up to monitoring devices, wearing the standard hospital gown. It wasn't the type of situation anyone would want to broadcast. As the meeting began, Jane noticed her supervisor was quick to jump in and remind everyone, again, that cameras needed to be on. Jane typed out a message in the chat, reminding Miss M of her request. This was when things escalated. Miss M called Jane out by name, in front of everyone, demanding she turn on her camera. Jane felt her face flush. She could hear the steady beep of the EKG machine next to her bed. All eyes, at least those on camera, seemed to be on her. It was at this moment that Jane remembered a conversation she'd had with Amy, one of the nurses. Amy had joked that if Jane ever needed to prove a point, she should just turn the camera on and show exactly what she was dealing with. The idea seemed absurd then, but now, it seemed like poetic justice. Jane adjusted her laptop, making sure the camera captured not just her face but also the entirety of her situation, the tubes, the machines, the bleak hospital room, and then she did it. She turned the camera on. The screen shifted, and Jane's image was now the largest on everyone's display. Thanks to the active speaker view, the EKG beeped audibly in the background. Jane spoke, her voice deliberately shaky, a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Miss M, as I mentioned in my previous messages, I am unable to turn on my camera today due to a private medical situation. However, I understand the importance of virtual engagement in this new era of learning." The dean, clearly taken aback, quickly intervened. "Jane, you're absolutely allowed to turn your camera off. I apologize for the misunderstanding." Jane smiled weakly, thanked the dean, and turned the camera off. The meeting continued, but not for everyone. Miss M left the call. Jane noticed that another participant, Anthony, Miss M's boss, also exited the meeting shortly thereafter. In the aftermath, Jane received no direct communication from Miss M. There was a strange sense of calm that followed. Jane wasn't someone who typically sought revenge, but in this case, she felt that she had stood up not just for herself but for anyone who had ever been pushed too far by someone in a position of power. It wasn't about humiliation, it was about making it clear that everyone has limits. And that empathy should always be the guiding principle, especially in an educational environment. This incident offers a powerful example of why empathy and understanding are critical in leadership roles. Miss M's insistence on enforcing the rules without any consideration for individual circumstances showcases a failure that goes beyond mere incompetence. It is a failure of basic humanity. When people are in positions of authority, whether in academia, the workplace, or elsewhere, they must remember that rules are guidelines meant to help, not weapons to wield against those already struggling. In reflecting on Jane's story, it's crucial to consider similar examples where strict adherence to rules led to unnecessary conflict. Consider the story of an employee named Mark who, during the COVID-19 pandemic, had to work from home while taking care of his elderly parents. His supervisor insisted on daily video check-ins, even though Mark had explained multiple times that his parents' health required his full attention during certain hours. Mark eventually complied, joining a video call while visibly distressed as he tried to assist his mother in the background. The sight made his colleagues uncomfortable, and it ultimately prompted HR to step in and revise the policy. The rule wasn't bad, it was the rigid enforcement without considering human needs that made it problematic. Another example involves a high school teacher who insisted that all assignments be submitted online by midnight on the due date. With no exceptions, one student, dealing with a family emergency involving an ill sibling, missed the deadline by an hour, despite the student's previous excellent record and a detailed explanation of the situation. The teacher refused to accept the late submission. This led to not only a lower grade but also a significant hit to the student's motivation. Later, when the issue was raised with the school administration, the policy was amended to include exceptions for emergencies. But the damage to the student's confidence had already been done. These examples illustrate a common thread. Authority figures often forget the human element behind their decisions. Jane's story stands as a stark reminder that sometimes, enforcing a rule isn't worth the harm it causes. Rules should serve the people, not the other way around. The core lesson from Jane's confrontation with Miss M is the importance of empathy in positions of authority. When leaders act without understanding the circumstances of those they are responsible for, they risk losing not only respect but also the opportunity to genuinely support and uplift others. Jane's act of turning on her camera wasn't just about compliance, it was a powerful statement about vulnerability, strength, and the expectation of basic respect. If you're a leader, a supervisor, or anyone in a position of influence, take this as a reminder. The people you work with are not just entries in a log or faces on a screen. They have stories, struggles, and lives that sometimes need a little understanding. Empathy doesn't mean ignoring the rules. It means knowing when to bend them to avoid breaking someone's spirit. Jane's courage in standing up to Miss M is something that can inspire all of us. Whether it's at work, at school, or in everyday interactions, remember that behind every rule is a person. And sometimes, what people need most is not enforcement, but understanding. Thank you for reading Jane's story. If you found it moving or insightful, consider sharing it with someone who might need a reminder about the power of empathy. And as always, be kind, because you never know the battles others are fighting.